All right, everybody, welcome to the Code 3 Industries podcast. I am your host, Nick Lopez, and today's guest, we have Sergeant Travis Harless, 18 years, Bakersfield Police Department, officer in charge of the VCAT team, Violent Criminal and Apprehension team, SWAT operator, and United States Marine Corps veteran, Iraq War veteran. Travis, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's, for those who may not know, let's get a little bit into your background, if you can. If you can give me like the movie trailer version of you, like who you are, a little bit of your background, and what you do now.
Sure, yeah. I'm from Bakersfield, California, born and raised. The way I kind of ended up here is I was a senior in high school on 9/11. After 9/11, I decided to join the Marine Corps. So on 9/12, I went to the recruiter's office and said I wanted to join the Marine Corps so I could kill terrorists. And I'm 41 now. That day I was still 16, senior in high school. My birthday's in November, so I was 16, and I had to wait until like 2.5 months until I turned 17 to actually enlist. So I went to MEPS in Los Angeles on my 17th birthday, November 29th of 2001. Enlisted in the Marine Corps, and then you have to graduate before they let you in. It's called the delayed entry program. So I graduated in 2002, and I went to boot camp in August of 2002. The job I selected, I was an infantryman. For those who don't know what that is, it's blow them up, shoot them up. When you think of a foot soldier, that's what an infantryman is. So I was a 0311 rifleman. I finished my training in February of 2003, and at that time, the entire U.S. military and coalition was ramping up for the invasion of Iraq. So they were already in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, like staged, getting ready to invade Iraq. And my unit that I was assigned to was already there. I got immediately from graduating infantry school deployed to Kuwait, and where I met my unit that was already there. And then like 3 weeks later, on March 19th of 2003, we crossed the line into Iraq and invaded from Kuwait into Iraq. I was there for like 7 months, came home in early October of 2003. And then, yeah, I ended up doing 2 more subsequent deployments after that. So I had 3 deployments in 4 years, which is like a lot. As the GWAT, the Global War on Terror, rolled on, they got better with the deployment cycles, but I was in that like early group that, so I ended up doing 3, and I was ready to get out and not do that anymore. I got out. It's kind of the abridged version. Got out and looking for work. I've meandered around for it took me about a year. I was like 11 months from the time I got out of the Marine Corps to the time I went to the police academy. So applied for Bakersfield Police Department because this is where I'm from. Got hired and wasn't like passionate about law enforcement. I'm not one of those kids that was like, man, I just want to be a cop my whole life, or was around cops. Like I didn't know anything about policing. I just needed a job. And so I, became a police officer, went to academy, became a police officer. And then once I started doing the job, I realized it's actually like a lot of fun and a lot different than what I kind of imagined in my head that cops do. Because my only interaction with cops was like getting pulled over for speeding and getting my speed. And so like I just didn't like I never called the cops or was never like really around police officers and stuff.
The average police interaction.
Yeah. And so once I got into it, I like really liked it. And then where I'm from, according to Gavin Newsom, Kern County is like the murder capital of the state, like per capita.
Yeah.
And so we've got a lot of violence here. A lot of stuff I wasn't aware of as a kid, or maybe you just like you're used to, you just think is normal. And so it's a really cool place to be an officer because there's lots of violent crime and other types of crime, and it's like super active. And most people, like, especially if you're a young guy, young girl, you sign up to be a cop when you're in your early 20s. Like you want to get out there and do exciting stuff. Like you don't want to, when you're 23, like you don't want to go be like a university police officer. And it's not to like throw shade at university police officers, but like you're not going to be, if you're looking for something exciting, like you're looking to chase bad guys, you're not going to be getting a lot of that. And so it's good for that. And then so I've been here 18 years. I've worked quite a few assignments. So I started off patrol like everybody does. I did that for 2 years. I went to the gang unit for 3 years. And during the time I was in the gang unit, I got on our SWAT team. We have a collateral duty SWAT team. So I got on the SWAT team in April of 2011. So it's been coming up on 15 years now. Gang unit for 3 years. Got out of the gang unit. I was real burned out at that point. Went back to patrol for 6 months. And then I got selected to be one of our range masters. So I was a range master for a little over 3 years. And during that time, I also ran in a police academy. I was a recruit training officer. I got selected to do that. So I did one academy for 6 months and then went back to the range. And then I promoted to senior officer, which is like a two-striper, like a corporal at most agencies, and went back to patrol for a little less than 6 months before I got picked up with VCAT, which is the assignment that I currently supervise. And that's the Violent Criminal Apprehension Team. And that's a group of, right now we have 6 officers and a sergeant, and it's like an undercover element that's selected from within our SWAT team to track down people wanted for violent felonies. So we get a lot of murder. We have about 50 murders a year here, so about one a week, give or take. And then all the other shootings and stabbings that happen. Our job is to track down the people that are wanted for those violent felonies. Anyway, I did that as an officer or as a senior officer for like a year and a half. Went back to patrol again, and then went to the academy again. I was at the academy for like 2 cycles and tested for sergeant, promoted in February of 2020, which was like the craziest time to promote to supervisor, because like the next month is when like the whole world just fell apart. COVID hit in March of 2020. I was a sergeant for 1 month, and everybody remembers that, all the craziness that came with that. And then, another 2 months after that is when the George Floyd incident happened, the riots broke out, and things went super crazy. So that was kind of getting thrown in the fire to be like being a supervisor, like being an officer. Like it would be hard as like a newer officer, but then like also being a new supervisor, it was hard. Just a lot of craziness going on. And then here in the town, it was an especially crazy and violent year in 2020, outside of all the stuff that was going on nationwide and around the world. 2021 and 2020 and 2021 were like especially like we had record high like shootings and murders those years. So I was patrol sergeant for 4 years, and then during that time, our department, the way our department works is our internal affairs division is staff. All the investigators are sergeants, and I'd been asked like multiple times to go to be an internal affairs investigator, and like I've got no interest in doing that at all. So I turned it down multiple times, and then in 2024, the end of the year, I got pulled into the assistant chief's office, and he's like, "Hey, I'm not asking if you want to do this. I'm just asking if there's any reason why you can't do this job." And I didn't have a good excuse. And so I ended up getting sent to internal affairs, and I worked that gig for a year as an internal affairs investigator, investigating other cops. And then at the end of the year, there was an opening for the job I have now. The guy who had been in that position for like 8 years was getting ready to retire. And so it just came up, and I guess I'd done good enough as an IA investigator to where I was coming out, and I got offered this position, and I took it, and now I've been here for a year, and it's the best of all the 18 years. This last year has been the best of all 18 years. Most exciting, most rewarding, just funnest time I've had.
Yeah, so needless to say, you've been and done and seen a lot of things that I would say a lot of agencies have a lot of proactive things going, but knowing, especially like with Bakersfield, there's not a lack of excitement, needless to say. But with that being said, I just wanted to go back a little bit, and both as being in the Marine Corps during the Iraq War, but also too being a police officer, like, did you have a kind of preconceived notion of what you think service would be like versus like what it actually was? And that could be both as like a soldier and being a cop.
Yeah, sure. The reason I joined the Marine Corps is I don't have come from a military family. I didn't know anything about any branches of the military. I just got really angry during 9/11,
Sure.
and I remember being taught in school and hearing like through my brother and other people that the Marines were like super badass, and that they were like, the elite military fighting force. And so I just thought, well, I want to go kill the terrorists, so I'm just going to go, pick that one because that's what I heard was, the best one or whatever. And so that's, I guess, as far as preconceived notions, I expected it to be like difficult. I expected it to be around a bunch of like just hardcore, like, killers. And to an extent, that's true. There's a little more nuance, I guess. But yeah, and then as far as like the war on terror, it came in at a weird time. So we fought a conventional war, I guess you could say, when it wasn't much of a war against the Iraqi army, because they didn't really put up much of a fight. And then that transition from that conventional style war to what ended up happening, which is the insurgency that's there, or it was there. Al Qaeda moved in. and took over certain sections and started like fighting the Americans that were there because they were there. And so there's a big difference between fighting a conventional war, it's like one army versus another, and fighting an insurgency, and where the people that are trying to hurt you are hiding and blending in with the local populace, and you have to be mindful of to the best of your ability, not hurting the locals or killing the locals, but also keeping yourself safe and finding the bad guys, and that's like super difficult. And another thing is that now, as an old man, I'm 41 now, and I think at that time, like, I was 21 years old when I got out of the Marine Corps. And so it's like you have a lot of these guys are like 20-year-olds that are squad leaders, and they're in charge of like 12 other Marines, and they're like on like they're fighting combat missions, like, getting killed and killing other people, and I think, like, when I talk to 20-year-olds at this point in my life, I just think that they're babies,
Yeah.
like, uh, like, I have my oldest, my stepdaughter, she's 24, and I think when I talk to her, like, she seems to me like just a baby, but to think that, like, you got 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that are, I say kids, but essentially they're kids to me, that are
Yeah.
doing this job, and like, what does that do to their development, for like long term?
Yeah.
These are people that aren't fully developed. Your brain isn't fully developed, till you're like 25 years old, and by that time they're like grizzled veterans. And yeah, sorry, I just kind of went on a rant there, but
No, you're okay. You bring up a really good point because it's like, I mean, I think with any past war, right? It's like you get 16, 17, 18-year-olds, you throw them in the middle of a war, and it changes you, you know, for better or for
yeah,
worse. And it's like, and then you come home, and like you said, you're 20 years old, and you've already probably lived a dozen lifetimes just in that span of, you know, being in wartime. And then you come back to like a civilian lifestyle with same, both civilians who are the same age or older, younger, who maybe you can't relate to or have no idea what the hell happened over there unless, you experienced it yourself.
yeah. There's a little difficulty with like relating with other people, and that happens. And I want to talk about the the PTSD that people get and like where that comes from. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately. There's the issue with relating with other people, but there's the issue of, like, what do they say? It's like 22 veterans a day that commit suicide. It was the number
Yeah.
that they were throwing around for a while. And it's like way more like U.S. military veterans have died from suicide than died from actual combat. And like, I know that, like, just as a sample size to be true. Like, I know way more people that killed themselves than I do who actually died in combat. And I don't know, like, there's a lot of things that contribute to that, like where that comes from. The big thing for me though is, as I get older and realizing that what we were sold in the beginning was a bunch of lies, and then thinking back on like the things that happened and the things that you did, and the fact that like it was all based on like bullshit and lies. I guess what I mean by that is, like, the Iraq war was, so 9/11 happens, right? Which is, 19 hijackers, I think 16 or 17 of them were Saudis, and they crashed these airplanes and kill 3,000 Americans. And now it sounds absurd to say, in hindsight, to say, like, because a group of mostly Saudi Arabian hijackers crashed a bunch of airplanes in American infrastructure, now we need to go and invade an entirely separate country, of Iraq, and topple the regime, and and because there's some sort of connection to the two. There was absolutely no connection between Al Qaeda, between Osama bin Laden's group and Iraq, and we were lied to about that. So there was a connection, and that basically Saddam was going to supply the terrorists with nukes that he didn't have if we didn't get in there, and it was all bullshit. And whatever. So we commit this war, and on totally false premises, or false pretense, and a lot of people die. The estimates is like a million Iraqis died in this war, and I don't know if that's true or not, but a lot of them did. And you think, and then you get out of this. So you say you go and you do this as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, and then you grow up. Like, you're basically a child at that point, and then you get out, you go back to your life, and you grow up, and then you start to reflect on, like, what happened, like, what did we do, and why did we do it, and the feelings of guilt that come up, that are I think that is a lot of what, like, kind of crushes people, and I can speak to it, like, for myself. Like, I've had that, like, big time, just like huge feelings of guilt and shame. And the thing that keeps me going is that I've got other things to do and to worry about. I've got a family I've got to take care of, and people that depend on me, and I've got a mission, and I engage in what I feel is meaningful work, and I found purpose. But if I wasn't in the position that I am now of like, being fortunate enough to find a wife and to have kids and to like have a job, and I don't know how things would have turned out for me. I think I very well could see myself being like one of those guys, one of those 22, because yeah, if you come back from the war and you fall into like just kind of sitting around and not getting into like something and finding a new mission and a new purpose, it's really easy to then start like ruminate on those thoughts and those feelings and so
What do you think was tougher for you? Was it actually being in the war, being in the middle of it, or was it the transition home from deployment?
just both. I had different phases of the war. Like when I first started, I was super gung ho about the idea, and I did 2 deployments, and then my wife and we met between my second and third deployment. And I remember when we first started dating, first time I met my sister-in-law, her sister, this is in like 2005. And she said to me, this is when people started to kind of question the whole narrative of like what we were doing in Iraq. And like, do you think that it's a just war and this and that? And I remember her saying to me, she said, do you think that America belongs in Iraq? And I said to her, well, I belong in Iraq. And what I meant by that is like all of my friends are going here, like we have this war that's happening, and I belong there to like assist in like protecting my friends and taking care of my buddies basically. And the fundamental like the reason for like the purpose for the country being there didn't even matter to me. Like, I don't even care. Like I don't think that deep about it. All I think is like, we're going, and it's better for me to be there to protect my friends than to not be there. And so, like, I belong there. And I don't think that way at all anymore as I get older. Um, but anyway, so you were asking about transitioning. So at that point in my life, I was super gung ho, and then my wife and we met, we got together, and I had switched sort of this mindset where I didn't think long term before that about what's going to happen to me and what my life's going to be like moving forward. It was just like really like living in the moment and kind of living as a dead man, like expecting to be killed and to just kind of be at peace with that and not like trouble myself with the anxiety of like what might happen to me. And that's like actually a really good way to live if you're fighting in a war. It really makes things a lot simpler. But once my wife and I got together, then I started thinking about like what does the future look like? And once you start to think about a future and a family and like being connected to another person, it's like then all of a sudden you can't have that attitude of just like, well, fuck it. Like if it happens, it happens. And so when I went for my third deployment, then for the first time I started to kind of feel like anxiety and fear and things would happen and that would bother me, and so it got difficult on my third deployment. But whereas my first two, it wasn't really like it was the job that I signed up to do, and it was just a day-to-day sort of life. But then switching and coming out, so when I got out, I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. I was 21, and I was a squad leader, and then I became a platoon guide right before I got out. I went from, oh, it sounds kind of um bad to say, but I went from being like kind of important to being not important at all. Like so I went from being a squad leader and then a platoon guide, like running these combat missions and like doing like high speed important work, to then I got out and I started working construction, and I was like, the only thing I was in charge of was like a wheelbarrow, and so it was hard to transition from like having a job where I felt like I had a purpose, and I was doing like things that were meaningful and difficult, to doing like I don't want to like diminish construction work because I really appreciate construction workers. It's a hard job that I obviously couldn't do, but I went to doing this like hard manual labor, and I didn't feel like there was any meaning to it. I wasn't making very much money, and it was like really difficult, and so it was hard to transition from being like um someone in a position of uh, importance and a little bit of authority and and a lot of power and all that, to transition into just like now I'm trying to live this regular life where there's no danger involved, but there's a level of difficulty and there's like this mundane aspect to it, and that was difficult for me to transition. Later on, though, as I got older and I started to actually reflect on it, because I didn't really reflect on the war for probably a decade, probably 10 years before I really started to think about it at all. And for me, it was like, what do you call? So you call it PTSD, but late onset like guilt and shame, as I really started to think about like, what did we do there and why did we do it? And what are those things that I did that like had just terrible consequences for some people? And then I realized like, man, if I didn't have all of this other stuff to worry about, like if I didn't have like a wife and kids to take care of, if I didn't have like a job I got to go to like 60 hours a week, and I was just alone ruminating on my thoughts, like this could get real dark, you know?
You brought up a really good point, and I think one of the big things you mentioned was purpose and motivation. Like you said, I think that's something that, and granted, I'm not a vet. I was just law enforcement, but that's one thing that I think I've heard with veterans and talking to them. That was the biggest thing that they struggled with was, like you said, during their time they had they had a purpose, they had motivation. Everything built in you is with a purpose from boot camp, everything on out, and then once you get out, it's almost like a completely different world. And sometimes not finding that purpose or feeling that I guess what I'm trying to say is like you said, not having that motivation tends to lead to ruminating thoughts and that struggle
Well,
with transitioning.
you have a mission when you're in the military and it's just given to you and you don't really have to decide. Like you don't have to take the initiative to decide like this is what we were going to go do. Like it's all decided for you and you're part of it no matter what you do. And then when you get out, it's like you're cut loose from all of that. And now you're in charge of finding that new mission and finding that new purpose. And so I think that's the big thing that people struggle with is like if you can find a purpose, if you can find something meaningful and you can find a new mission, then you're going to do okay. But the problem is you have to do that on your own. Whereas when you're in the military, like there's someone telling you, okay, this is what we're going to go do today. And like, this is what the long term, this is what the deployment is going to be. This is like what the schedule is going to be. And like, it's all structured for you. And if you don't learn how to develop the skills to now get your own shit together and like decide what that mission is gonna be, then yeah, it's very easy to fall into that.
And I know you talked about kind of late onset, like a decade later, that you really started to reflect about, what happened during the war.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like during your time over there in Iraq, being infantry, you said three deployments, and then really being in the middle of it, being an infantryman, and then just coming back. Was there anything, and if you didn't, everyone's reacts differently to it. Again, being an infantryman and just constantly being in danger of, Taliban, Al Qaeda, IEDs being blown up, roadside bombs, snipers. Was there anything you specifically struggled with when you came home?
Yeah. Well, I like to talk, I guess, more about the late onset stuff.
Hmm.
There's guys that struggle with like they get anxiety when they drive and they see like debris on the road because of
Yeah.
IEDs and like that kind of stuff in crowds. And for me, like the late onset stuff, I have this like Substack where I used to write a lot of pieces and I wrote a piece about this. It was called Car Bombs, Babies and Bad Guys. And I was talking about a specific incident on a specific day. It was in May of 2006. So I was on my last deployment. I came home July 6th of 2006. So I came home like about a month and a half after this. Or maybe it was June. It was like right at the end of my time to come home. So I was a squad leader and I was in charge of this a squad of Marines is 12 Marines. So the way the structure breaks down is there's a fire team is 4 Marines, one of them's a team leader, and then there's 3 fire teams in a squad. There's which is a squad leader, and then there's 3 squads in a platoon. And there's like 4 platoons in a company and 5 companies total in a battalion. But anyways, I was a squad leader, so I was in charge of 12 of the Marines. And on this particular mission, we were tasked with taking they were called the CIT, I think it was. It's the civil team that would go around and talk with the local like business owners. And by business owners, I mean like basically shopkeepers. And they would try to help them provide like services. They would give them money and try to provide them with assistance to essentially boost the local economy and to get things to try to rebuild the country at that point. And this was in Al Qaim, Iraq, which is on the far west end of Iraq. We're within like a mile from the Syrian border, like right on the Syrian border. And so we're doing this operation where we're going to go around to these local shopkeepers. And in Al Qaim, there's these 2 main east-west running roads that run through the city. One at the south end of the city, one at the north end of the city. And on my second deployment, so the year before this, those two roads were like super sketchy, like IEDs everywhere. It's like lots of Marines got killed in that area and injured, getting blown up by roadside bombs. And then by my third deployment, during my second deployment and into my third deployment, a lot of the tactics had shifted. They were still using IEDs, but then it's when the VBIED, the vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, started being like prevalent. Sorry, this is a little kind of backstory to kind of set it up. So that's like a car bomb. Someone driving a car into your patrol and detonating it and killing the people that are there. So that started to become prevalent, and our tactics shifted a little bit. We were doing a lot of vehicle-borne stuff, like coming in on Humvees and trucks. And then on my third deployment, our base was actually like right in the middle of the city, and we would do foot patrols from out of our base. We just basically walk out the front gate and you're in your area of operation. Whereas on my second deployment, our base was a little bit further back. We'd have to drive in to get to where we were going to do our missions. This day in 2006, we're doing a CIT mission where we're going to go and talk to these shopkeepers, and my squad is in charge of security for these guys that are going to be talking to the shopkeepers. And we're on MSR Diamond is what it was called. It's this east or west running street on the north end of the town, and there's all kinds of shops in this area where they sell everything, like food and all kinds of stuff. It's like a big bazaar. And they're walking through there, and one of my team leaders, who was in my squad, had come to me and said, "Hey, do we want to stop traffic or do we want to allow traffic to flow through?" And I made the call that we're not going to let any of the cars flow through because of the VBID threat. Now, we had an SOP at the time for how to stop approaching cars. If you're on a foot patrol and you have a car approaching you, there's a threat, always a threat that might be a VBIED. And so the way that you deal with it is the vast majority of the cars in the area are just locals that are driving around, but there's that threat of getting blown up by a VBIED. And so the way that you deal with oncoming cars is we had these neon reflective flags, and you would pull the flag out and you'd wave it to kind of get their attention and to wave them off so that they would turn and not drive to your patrol, but turn off and go a different route. And if the flag didn't work, then the next step was to fire up a pin flare, which is just this little flare we had usually one or two in a patrol. We didn't actually have enough of them, and we would fire the pin flare in the direction of the car to like get their attention so they'd see us, so that they know, hey, turn and pull off. If the pin flare didn't work, then you would fire warning shots. And in every Marine's magazine, the first 5 rounds that you would put were tracer rounds. So tracer rounds they've got some chemical that burns. So when you shoot the bullet, it's on fire. It comes out. And when you shoot tracers at night, you've seen those, right? You could see the red like bullets flying through the air. Like those are tracer rounds. So the first 5 rounds are tracer rounds, and those are designed to get the attention. And you fire warning shots off to the side of the vehicle. And then if the warning shots don't get the vehicle to stop, then you shoot try to disable the vehicle by shooting the engine block. If that doesn't work, then you shoot the driver. Now that's a lot of steps. These things can unfold very quickly. So they give every Marine has the authority to go from straight to deadly force if they feel the threat is imminent and necessary, if that makes sense. So ideally you go through those steps in that process, but some things unfold too quickly to where you can't, and you have to protect yourself. So those are the escalation of force to deal with vehicles. And on this particular day, sorry, I keep kind of bouncing around.
No,
My
you're okay.
squad was another aspect of this is we were trying to transition from the U.S. military running Iraq to the Iraq military and the Iraqi government running its own country. And so we had embedded with us all these Iraqi soldiers, and we would, on our operations, on our patrols, if I would take a group of like 8 Marines out, I'd have to have 2 Iraqi soldiers with us. And the idea is that we're training them and we're working together, and then eventually they're gonna start running their own operations. So on this day, I had two Iraqi soldiers, and we were in what's called a staggered column, which is a patrol formation where you're on both sides of the road, and you have one guy, your point man in the front, and then across the other side of the street and staggered back is your number 2 guy, and then back on the other side, alternating all the way back through the patrol. And I had like probably eight Marines or so, plus our attached CIT guys, and then I had my 2 Iraqi soldiers. And I had put my 2 Iraqi soldiers as the patrol leader. I chose to put them in the front behind the first 2 Marines, number 1, number 2, the point man, number 2. So 3 and 4 were Iraqi soldiers. So anyways, the team leader comes to me, he's like, hey, we're going to let traffic flow, because sometimes we would let it flow through. We would just set, if we're going to be in a position long enough, and just let them go. But I chose not to. And part of that selfishly was I was the end of my I was about to come home because my end of active service was August of 2006, and I knew they were going to be sending me home in July. I had like a month left, and I was like, I made it through, two full deployments. I'm at the very end of my third one. I haven't been killed yet. I really want to get back home to my wife. Like, I'm not letting anybody drive through this fucking patrol. So no, they're not coming through. Um, so anyways, we get to this point in the road where about 50 meters in front of the patrol, there's a bend in the road. So you can't see around the bend of the cars coming. So if cars come from around that bend, they're not seeing us and we're not seeing them till they're like right on top of us. And, sure enough, this happens where we're set there in a security position. CIT's talking to the local shopkeepers, and this car comes around the bend and it's moving pretty quick. My point man goes to wave the flag and he's trying to wave the car off. Car's not stopping, so he switches to the pin flare. And as he's getting ready to deploy the pin flare, he's the number one guy, the point man. My two Iraqi soldiers are number 3 and 4, who are behind him. So the car's in front of the two Marines, and then there's two Iraqis behind him, and the car's coming towards the front of the two Marines, and he's getting ready to fire the pin flare, and the two Iraqi soldiers start firing at the car. Well, they're firing from their position basically through past the two Marines that are in front of them to shoot at the car. So these Marines that now have this car that's speeding towards them are now they're not being shot at, but they're being shot through
Right.
from behind. And both of them dive out of the way for cover because now they're getting shot, basically essentially getting shot at from behind.
Right.
So they dive out of the way. The Iraqis start shooting the car, and the car accelerates. So it starts getting hit and it accelerates, and it comes through the patrol. It drives through the Iraqis. They're shooting it as it passes, and then the Marines on the backside of the number 3 and 4, the Iraqis, they start shooting too. The car's speeding up and it's coming through, and now it's like in the center of our patrol. And I remember, like me, I didn't even respond. Like, I'm standing there towards the back of the patrol at that point, because as a patrol leader, you're kind of free to move about all over. But at this point, when they had come through, I was towards the rear, and it drives through the center of the patrol, and it's accelerating, and they're all shooting. I got at least 4 shooters at that time. They're all putting rounds in this thing, and I remember thinking like this is it. This is it, like things started to kind of move in slow motion, which is weird when you get in those like life or death situations. So people report like things like slow down, and like I remember things just really, it felt like I was in slow motion, and I didn't even like react. Like, I didn't like try to get find cover. I thought like, this is it, I'm dead. And I remember being so disappointed. Like, I made it this far. I made it through almost 3 whole deployments, and I'm like this close to going home and being done. And now here I am. I'm going to die on the side of some shitty road in Iraq. And the car, like it's getting shot as this is happening, and it pulls to the side of the road and it comes to a stop. And I told you about the tracer rounds, right? So tracer rounds they have fire in them. So these Marines are shooting tracers into the engine and into this car. And the thing about bullets that are on fire, when they go into like an engine, they start a fire. So the car immediately like is smoking, and it catches fire like right away immediately. And so it pulls to the side of the road and it stops. And I was standing next to one of my Marines, Brian Perez, and we were talking as I was talking to him right before this happened. So I'm standing right next to him as this is coming in, and he takes a knee and he points in with his 203, and right as he's getting ready to fire off a grenade, I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, wait, and I said, stop, because the car, it pulls the side of the road, and it didn't blow up. So, I mean, obviously I'm still here, but in my mind, I'm thinking this is a car bomb, we're dead.
Right.
So it doesn't blow up, and I realize, okay, that's not a VBID, so it's something else. And he's getting ready to shoot a grenade into this car. I stopped him from doing it. He told me later, because I thought he was going to fire his rifle, but he was like, no, I was going to send a grenade into that thing. And so I'm glad I stopped him because of what ended up happening. So the car stops. There's a little bit of a pause, about 5 or 10 seconds, and then the driver door opens, and out steps this man, and he's like bleeding out of his neck, and his blood's pouring down, and he's like screaming. So we realized, okay, this isn't a terrorist. This is just someone from the local population. He came around the bend, and we surprised him, and when the Iraqis started shooting, he panicked and he accelerated. And when he accelerated, that made the rest of the Marines think that this is for sure a car bomb. And then they all start
Right.
shooting, and it just turned into this whole thing, right? So it was a perfect storm of our tactics with poor decision making on his part, and it led to this, right? So he comes in, he stops, he gets out, he's bleeding, he's screaming, and then all the locals that were in the shops had all ran for cover. They all had ducked down, they all hidden, and everybody was hiding, like ducking behind stuff. And then when it didn't blow up, they all kind of got up and they started coming out. and they started coming out to kind of help with this situation, this burning car. And they opened the front passenger door and they pulled this woman out. And the woman had, I remember her face still. She had a single 223 round entry wound, like right between her eyes, in the
Wow.
forehead. And then she had on one of her forearms, his left or right forearm, it was completely like blown apart and missing. Like, have you ever seen someone hit with a 223 or with a 5.56? Like, it really like explodes, like whatever it hits, it destroys. And so it looked like her arm was almost halfway blown off where well, I'm assuming as the bullets are coming in, she puts her arm up like this, and she takes one through the forearm. And she was like obviously dead. And then they pull out of the back seat, they open the back door and they pull another woman out. And she was covered up with like the burqa, so you couldn't see her injuries, but there was a lot of blood and she was obviously dead too. And so they have polygamy in their culture. So this is these guys' two wives, and they're both dead. And then one of the citizens, one of the Iraqis that was there at the bazaar, gets on the other side, opens up and pulls out this baby, and it's like probably like an 18-month-old baby. And I remember them pulling the baby out and they're holding on to it, and this little boy, and he's like covered in blood. There's blood coming off the top of his head, down his face, down his whole body, just like covered in blood. And I thought, like, oh man, like a baby too. Like, this is just getting worse and worse, right? So there's this
Right.
like bleeding guy, this dead woman, another dead woman, and now this baby like covered in blood. And I realized I'm looking at this baby, and he's just like calm face, like he's like not crying, he's not upset. He just appears like he's just having a regular day, and he's just being held by this woman, and but he's covered in blood. And I realized that like the blood, none of the blood was coming. He wasn't injured, he didn't get hit at all, but the blood was because he was sitting in his mom's lap in the back seat, and she got blown apart, and she bled all over the baby like when she died. And so he's like covered in his mom's blood, but he's uninjured. And so one of our mobile assault platoons was in the area, and I think they heard the gunfire, or we might have got on and requested them. But they came over, they kind of assisted. They load up these, they were dead, but they load the wounded guy and the two women, and they evacuated them. And we go back to the base, and I remember I didn't even get interviewed about it. This is how kind of fucked up the whole thing is. They did an investigation, because there were some civilian casualties, and an investigator from the division came out, and I was a couple days later. It was between operations, and I was asleep. And I remember him telling me like, "Hey, the investigator's here," and I was like, "Oh, whatever. If he needs me, you can talk to me." And he didn't even didn't even talk to me, like didn't even interview me. And I was the patrol leader. So anyway, so when that happened, like, I was pretty hard of heart, and like it didn't bother me. Like, I wasn't really upset about it. It's kind of fucked up to say, but I'm just at that time I was 21-year-old, and I'd been through 2 deployments. This is the end of my third deployment, and I was just grateful that like it wasn't a car bomb and that I didn't die. And those weren't the first civilian casualties I'd seen. I'd seen a bunch of civilians get killed. Like, it happens a lot, but it didn't bother me, and I just didn't really think about it again that much for the next like 10 years. And then when I started reflecting back on the war itself, and I realized that like we entered into this conflict under false pretenses. Like, Al Qaeda didn't exist in Iraq until the Americans showed up, and then Al Qaeda came to Iraq for the specific purpose of fighting the Americans. And then like we left the country and turned it over, and then we funded ISIS, which was an offshoot group of Al Qaeda, of Bin Laden's group, and ISIS took over the whole country. And like we made that place, we took it from being like a functional dictatorship, like Saddam was a bad guy. It's like, sure, yeah, Saddam's a bad guy, like the world's full of bad guys, right? But it was a functional country, and we turned it into this like chaotic civil war zone that ended up getting run by the very people that we said that we were going there to like stop. Like, it was all bullshit. And again, they say 1 million people died in this conflict. Maybe that's exaggeration, maybe not. But I can tell you firsthand that a lot of people died, and I know because I took part in killing them. Like, so on this particular patrol, like, I didn't pull the trigger, but I set all of the precursors in motion that led to the death of these people. Like, I was in charge, so anything that happens on that mission is my responsibility. It's, good or bad, it's on me,
Right.
and that's on me, you know. And so, like, yeah, I didn't personally kill these people, but I made the decisions that caused them to get killed. And here I am now, I'm thinking about it as I get older. When I'm 21, it's like, yeah, kind of whatever. But when, again, this is the kind of the what happens is you do this as a kid, and then you grow up and you become a man, you become an adult. I get married, I have kids, and then I start thinking about you start thinking about it, like that little boy, still like picture him when I when my kids are little, when my my daughter or my son is a year and a half old, and I'm holding the baby and I'm thinking like, Jesus, like there's no difference between my kid and that kid, and like these people are this guy, he's just driving one day, just driving down the road in his town and going to the store or wherever he was going, and a bunch of Marines just fucking mowed down him and his whole family. And like I think about this kid now, this has occurred in 2006, so he's if he was a year and a half old, then now he's 21 years old, and if he's still alive, like what is life like for him now, if he's still alive, if he's still around, and like how can he become anything but like but an American hating, like we call them terrorists? How can he become anything but that? You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
would, if when I was a 2-year old, if somebody murdered my mom or killed my mom and shot my dad and shot my mom out from underneath me, that I would spend my life doing everything I can to find those people and to kill those people. Like, and that's just one microcosm, one small example of what I think has happened, tens of thousands of times. And we have this idea that like, oh, we're going to go and stop Al Qaeda, but like all we're doing is making more Al Qaeda. Like that kid, like how does he become anything but Al Qaeda terrorists? That's like the life path that we kind of set for him, and we've done so much more harm than good. And so I don't want to get like big picture with you too much, but I think the big picture, we've made the world a lot worse with these wars, and the guilt and shame that I feel for having participated in that now as I get older is one of the things that I struggle with. And so I'm not suicidal. I've never like contemplated it or kind of been down that road, but I see how if I didn't have a mission or a purpose, and I was reflecting on this and realizing like my part in doing these things that were so terrible, I could very easily fall into that. So it makes sense why so many of these guys are killing themselves.
Yeah. And it's, and, thank you for sharing
Sorry,
that.
we kind of went a little a little wild there.
No, 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 no. Because it's, this, what you're talking about, it's not uncommon. And I think it's something that I think a lot of vets, like yourselves, I think struggle with. And regardless of, everyone's own personal experiences, in the war. But just like what you were talking about, I think it's, you go in under, like you said, maybe like a preconceived notion of what was told to us. And then, during your time in the war, and then, you have to do your job. You're a leader of men. You have to do what you have to do. And then all your experiences, everything that happens, and then time goes on and you kind of reflect on everything that's happened as you get a little older. And it's just, and everyone experiences it differently. They're immediately affected as soon as they get out. But others, it's, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road, and everyone sees it and experiences, what their experience was during the war. But no, and thank you for your service,
Well, thanks.
and appreciate everything that you're able to share with the listeners.
Yeah, man.
And
But yeah, we talk about PTSD, but I don't know. For me, it's like I'm not one of those immediate people. Maybe it takes a while for things to set in. I'm a slow learner, so maybe mine is a late onset because I'm just kind of dumb, and it takes me a while to figure things out.
oh,
But yeah,
it's just, like you said, it's I think we could have an entire separate episode, 3, 4 episodes, just talking about what happened in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. But maybe that could be
yeah,
another episode.
yeah.
But just kind of going your experiences as a Marine during the Iraq War, you transition home after your deployments, and then you transition, you said like you did a small amount of time construction, you said it wasn't for you, and then you decided to get into policing. And during your time, as a Marine, an infantryman, was there anything specific that you brought home from the Marine Corps that you felt either helped or hindered you going into law enforcement?
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to sound like too whiny about it too. Like when I tell that story, like, my feeling towards the Marine Corps is just like nothing but gratitude. And I feel like anytime you do something difficult, it develops character. You know what I mean? And so the thing I'm most grateful for was the ability to like deal with hardship. And I think it was very good for me to learn that and to experience that early on in life. And so I'm not complaining about it. I'm not saying like, oh, it's so woe is me or anything like that. I think it was overall it was good for me as like a 17-year-old to get some hardship and to experience that early. And then what happens is when you get out, for me anyways, like nothing was ever as difficult as that, and so it was like it's like when you're training with like weights, like people like train with ankle weights and like jump and then they take the ankle weights off and all of a sudden they can jump higher. It was just kind of
Mhm.
like that. It's like once you get out, like nothing is ever as difficult as it was then. And you can I'm fortunate that I can reflect on those things and be like, yeah, today kind of sucks. It definitely could be a lot worse. And so that made things easier for me moving forward. So when I went to the police academy, like I remember talking to we run a high stress academy. The RTOs, you yell at the recruits and you got to do a lot
Sure.
of PT. And so it's based off like a military model. And I remember people in the academy asking me like, "Hey, is this harder than boot camp? Is this like what's harder, this or boot camp?" And I remember just like laughing because some people actually think that the police academy is harder than boot camp. But I remember laughing like this is baby shit compared to boot camp. When you go to boot camp, like they own you. You live there. Like the police academy again. No matter how difficult it is, like at 5 o'clock we're gonna go home. I'm gonna sleep in my bed. I'm gonna eat. Like I'm gonna sit on my couch. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna go have my normal life. I'm just here for 10 hours a day or whatever it is. But I still have my life. Like they freaking own you.
Yeah.
So there was that made the academy like way easier just for having that background. The basic skills that you learn, the physical fitness stuff is key and super helpful as a police officer, especially in the academy. The like shooting skills, like you go to the range, obviously you got to learn how to shoot, and having a background in firearms is like, super helpful. So like those kind of baseline skills that everyone else is having to work on and learn that I kind of already had, and then I could really focus on like the academic side. So it's most people go in if you come as a civilian off the street and you have all of this stuff going on. You get this guy's yelling at me and that's like stressing me out. And I'm worried about learning, dry practicing and learning how to shoot. And maybe you didn't prepare physically very much, like so your fitness isn't where it should be, and you're dealing with all of those things. And then on top of that, like now you have to like learn all of the stuff, like all of the laws and all of the policies and all the things that you need to learn to be a police officer with all of that going on in the background. And for me, coming from the Marine Corps, like all of that background noise just basically didn't exist. Like it didn't bother me if someone's yelling and whatever. It didn't bother me like doing the PT was easy. Like learning the firearm stuff. Like a lot of the stuff was just like those boxes were kind of already checked, so I could really like focus on the academic side and developing that. So I excelled. I did well. I was honor grad of the academy, and then moving forward, that just really benefited me having that background because because people knew because they know about you. You have to obviously they do a background on you and you have to you explain yourself and tell where you come from. So people knew I had come from the Marine Corps. They knew that I was an Iraq War veteran. And so I think people had a perception of me that was a little bit higher than the truth, right? Like they thought like, oh damn, watch out for this dude, but like really like not that intimidating or I'm not that badass, but like people kind of thought more than the truth. Like there was more hype. And so that kind of helps moving forward when you sort of have a good reputation, your reputation carries forward. Like if you're applying for a specialized assignment and it's you versus another person or you versus these 5 other people and you've got a better reputation, well then you're going to be the one that gets it. And so that really helped me to be a good reputation builder in the beginning, which helped me to do well in the academy to help my reputation. And then when I got on the streets, I worked hard and I made good arrests and I did good police work, and it just like kind of things snowball for you. Like whereas if you get stuck in a rut where you say you have a bad reputation, it's really hard to get out of having a bad reputation than it is to build on a good reputation. And so things for me have just gone really well. And I think that the starting point was coming from the military, coming from the Marine Corps and being a war veteran. That was like my start point. So I had an advantage on like all of my peers just by having that reputation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that helped me a lot. Just a ton of skills that you learn, you pick up, and life skills and the ability to deal with hardship.
I've been not to go off track a little bit because I think it's incredibly important. We were the same way. Our academy was 24 weeks. You're getting yelled, screamed at, stress inoculation, make sure you don't break under pressure, things like that. But but funny enough, I don't know if it's just the new generation or the way things are going. And I'm not saying this is for every single academy, but I've been hearing some horror stories now about how, for lack of a better phrase, dumbed down the academies are now, especially when it comes to stress inoculation. They're like, no, even like I've heard some like officers up in, let's say like the Washington or like Oregon area. It's, you're come in like around 9 o'clock, you walk in, cup of coffee, you're in hoodie, jeans, and academy instructors are not going to yell at you. They're not going to scream at you. And if you feel like something's wrong, or you feel, oh, you know what? I think we should do things this way. Then you can go and talk to whoever's in charge of the academy. And it's just wow.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
again, that could be an entirely different episode. So after the academy, you go right into just, regular patrol work. I usually like to ask this question to all the guests. I was just wondering, in your experience, like, what do you think is the biggest misconception that the public has about patrol work?
Well, I know the misconception I had is I thought that cops just like pulled people over and wrote tickets. Like I didn't even understand, for me personally, like I didn't understand like what a call for service was. Like if you called the cops, I remember cops being called for like party calls, and they would show up and basically like shine their lights and yell at you to get out of there.
Hmm.
Like so I had those interactions where I'm like, I don't know what they do other than like, hang out and pull people over and write tickets. But there's so much more. Like, and I think back now, like I've been a cop 18 years, and um, I've I think the last time I actually wrote a traffic ticket was in 2010. It's been like 15 or 16 years, like so yeah, it's like so radically different from whatever I thought that they did. That yeah, it's hard to even to bridge that gap. There's things there's way there's like the Cops, the TV show, and there's things like the public has a better understanding now of what police did than I did when I went to the police academy. But yeah, I say a big misconception is that like cops are just people, and it's real easy as a citizen, as a civilian, to like look at an officer and not see that's a person in there, that has all of the same like fears and anxieties and problems that you're dealing with. Like they're dealing with that too. Like like yeah, yeah, that guy probably had a fight with his wife earlier in the day. You know what I mean? Or like that guy's like worried about his like sick kid at home. Or like there's all of the normal like human emotions and experiences that person is dealing with that's inside them, and then on top of that they're doing the police work, and it's easy to look at them and just see a uniform and just see like that's almost like not even think that that's a real person, that's like a robot in a uniform sort of.
Right.
So yeah, just recognizing that they're people too, that they have their they make mistakes, they make bad decisions, they have sometimes they have complicated, messed up personal lives, but generally speaking they're trying to do their best. And so I think that's it. And the other thing is that the police officers aren't like a block, like they're not a united block. Being a cop in California is a whole lot different than being a cop in like Georgia. There's different cultures, there's different types of crime that they deal with, there's different department policies. Like there's like from one place to the next can be so very different, that the way that the officers act within an agency in one place to the way in a different place is going to be, the priorities are different and can be so much different. And so that's why when an incident occurs, it's like a negative bad incident, it happens in a different part of the country, it has this ripple effect on all the departments nationwide. We saw that with like George Floyd. Like that occurred in Minneapolis, and it's like, what does Minneapolis have to do with Bakersfield? But if you were to say that to somebody like a citizen, that that they don't see it that way. Like it's just all cops, and it's like, no, it's not all cops. It's not even all cops in that department, but it's definitely not all cops across all departments. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's what makes it unique to law enforcement. It's, if someone messes up in some department clear across the country, we all bear the brunt of it.
One other thing I wanted to say is people, like, nobody likes bad cops. Like there's bad cops, obviously, right?
Mm.
But you know who hates bad cops the most?
Other cops.
Cops.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, so if you're a citizen, you're like, man, I really hate these bad cops. Like whatever you saw on whatever clip you saw on the internet or whatever. It's like, if you were to ask any other officer, like any police officer, what they thought about it, I guarantee most of the time they hate that guy or girl way more than you do, because again, they're people, so they have all the same like concerns and fears and problems that you have. But then in addition to that, like that's also a representative of them and their team, you know? So it's nobody hates bad cops more than other cops.
Right. And it's like you said, I think it's unfortunately, for bad or for good, a lot of media misconceptions that paint law enforcement a certain way. And you're right, nobody hates bad cops more than other cops. But again, be a whole other episode for just that topic alone. But yeah, and just kind of moving forward, because how much time did you do on patrol before you started going into specialized units?
2 years, like exactly.
2 years. Okay.
Yeah, 2 years of patrol officer, and then I was in the gang unit for 3 years.
If you can, without getting yourself in trouble, you able to share one of the more memorable stories or a radio call that you had that was just either ridiculous or just like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, I mean, we get all kinds of stuff. So like funny things happen, terrible, sad things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind, and I've talked about this like on our podcast, the canines. How about that? Canine officers, police canines, police dogs. And a funny thing about them, so a notion that I had before is that, like the dog is just like almost like a robot, like they can just give it commands and it does the things, and then like and listens to the handler like perfectly. And not to say that they're not very well disciplined, but they're biological creatures. They're animals, you know, and so they get a vote too. So and they have personalities and like and seeing the dogs work. Like I've never been a can handler, but I've worked around a lot of them, and I have no desire to ever be a can handler because like you know the dogs bite, and it sounds silly to say, but it's like this thing is like one small genetic step away from being a wolf, and it bites. And like I don't want that in my car. Like I don't
Yeah.
want to be like I don't want to be with that animal all day every day. So like, mad respect to the can handlers because I could never do that job. Um, Anyways, I was thinking about this call. We were doing a wire. We're monitoring these like gangsters, and we got some information that they were going to be moving some guns from this apartment complex, and we're surveilling it. And they get in the car, they go to leave, and the surveillance units call it out. So the marked units go to stop it, and boom, it takes off. Pursuit happens. He goes in this pursuit. Pursuit lasts for like maybe a minute. Car crashes. Dude footbails from it, the driver, he was running. Now we know that there's guns in this car because our undercovers had watched them like take guns out of this apartment, put them in the car, and then drive away. Now in hindsight, I don't think that a traffic stop is like the appropriate tactic. And as a supervisor now of an undercover unit, like that's not what I would do. But this is back before I was in that position. So, anyways, this guy crashes, he footballs, so we know he's on the run. He's a gang member, and he's probably armed because we just saw him with guns. So he starts hitting fences in this neighborhood, and we go to look for. And we're set a perimeter on it, trying to lock it down, and we start working the search yard to yard. We know he's gone to ground. We know he's like in this one block. And as we're searching these yards, going house to house, this lady comes out of one of the houses that's about half a block down, maybe like 7 or 8 houses down from where the crash occurred, where he was last seen. She comes running out and she says, "Hey, this guy just ran through my house." And she describes him, and it's our guy. So we know he's in there. And he's like, "Is he in there right now?" She's like, "I don't know. I ran out." So like her and the whole family comes out, and it's just like in the evening they were cooking dinner, so they still had the stove was on. They're still cooking. They're cooking food in the house. We go to clear the house, so we lock down that particular yard, the house, and we go to the door to clear it. And I was in VCAT at the time, and we had a canine was assigned to us, and that canine handler was gone that day. Like I think he was off or whatever, so we had to use one of our patrol canines that we had never like worked with or trained with. So he comes over, we're like, "Hey, what we want to do is we want to clear behind the dog. So we think our suspect's in here. Can you send the dog, clear the room? You know, then we'll make an entry. We'll clean up, make sure that there's nobody in there, and send the next room, so on and so forth. To clear the structure from behind the dog." And he's like, "Oh yeah, totally." You know, we never train, and that's how we would train with our dogs, but we had never trained with this dog. So he gets the dog up on, gives us announcements, you know, tells him there's a police canine, you know, come out, dog will bite you, whatever. No response, sends the dog in. The dog goes running in, and it turns right into this room, and it's in there for like 10 or seconds or so, and he's like, it's not we don't hear, we don't see the dog, can't see what he's doing, and the handler calls the dog back, so the dog comes running back out, and it has a shoe in its mouth. And I'm like like I don't think that dog's looking for our suspect, you know, like
Just looking for a chew toy.
yeah. He goes back out, he's got a shoe in his mouth, and then like So he like tells him to drop it. He drops it. He runs in the next room and he's like messing around there. And it's like, I'm really not getting the feeling that he's like, look, I'm not confident that like this dog is actually searching for our suspect. And then he comes back out and he just stops and he takes a shit like right there in the hallway, like right, right by the front door. And they're like, dude. So it's like, okay, just get that dog out of there. So he gets him out of there and we go in and we end up clearing it. And but like as we're trying to clear it, it's like smells like dog shit because dogs took a big old shit. And like two of our guys have got like real weak stomachs. And so we're like trying to be on guns, like, and like tactically cleared this room. But like two guys are like literally gagging as we're like
Gagging.
trying. Yeah, trying to, and we're also looking for this like gang member with a gun, like
Yeah.
so
An important part.
yeah, so we end up the dog goes into the kitchen looking and takes another shit. Ends up taking two big old giant shits in this house, and we clear the house. He's not in there. We get to the backyard, and there's two outbuildings, like a converted garage and a shed. Clear those out, and he sends the dog around the side yard, along the run that's between like the fence and the side of the house. And the dog goes back there. He comes running back out, like, and no indication there's a suspect back there. And so me and one of the other operators are like, okay, let's just go clean that up real quick and check, and then we're going to search these two outbuildings. And so we go back there just to double check to make sure, and like, like they had a bunch of like trash and other stuff on the side of the house. They had these big bags of like recyclables, cans, and there was like some plywood laid over the top of it. And as we're clearing back there, we're like, look, and on top of the bags, our suspects are like laying there, and we could see a gap between the plywood. I could see his like belly button, like his midsection sticking out. Like, holy shit, there's our suspect. Like, this freaking dog like just went back there, and we were just like double checking real quick before we're certain he's going to be in the shed, because he's not in the house. Like, oh fuck, he's like right there, like, so I'm like, oh no, like, what is this dog even doing besides like shitting everywhere and not finding the suspect? So we get him or
Man.
whatever. But I remember just like feeling so bad for this poor family, like they're there like cooking dinner, like getting ready to have dinner, and like all of a sudden some fucking gang member with a gun comes running through their house, and then like go out to get help from the cops, and then the cops show up and the fucking dog shits in the in the kitchen, and like we cleaned up for them and everything, obviously, but like, I mean, these poor people, they're just trying to live their life, and like all this chaos just like all of a sudden descends on them.
It's a hell of a dinner conversation to have.
Yeah, yeah. There's that. I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff that happens in the job. Better than anyone. It's crazy, man. Wild stuff goes down.
And so obviously, like, usually people's first conception of like SWAT or like specialized units, something like VCAT, the criminal apprehension team, they see like the door kicking, go in, warrants, all that. But like, what's the real ratio of like the training, the prep, and the waiting compared to the actual,
Yeah.
application of it?
So I'd say and VCAT, so we're an undercover unit, and like I said, we track down violent criminals. Most of what we do is surveillance, because when you're trying to find somebody, you gotta find them. The actually catching them is like, I guess, the fun part. Like you're talking about door kicking and search warrants and stuff like that, and that's less than 1% of the actively going in and grabbing the bad guy. But the vast majority of the time it's like long extended periods of boredom that are punctuated by like real super high speed, sketchy, exciting things. So, you're doing surveillance. Sometimes you'd be doing it for days on end before you find your guy. And surveillance is like you're sitting in a car, engine off, trying to not be like picked up or noticed by the other people in the neighborhood, trying to look at a house or look at a car or looking, just staring at nothing, staring at a door, waiting for your suspect to come out. And sometimes you can do that for like days on end. And it's like you have to stay locked in. You can't like be like messing around on your phone, because if you're looking at your phone, you're not going to see the guy come popping out. So you have to just be basically sitting quiet, staring at a door. And it gets really hot here, so if it's like in the summertime, you got to have your car off, because if your car is running, then people are going to make you. And so yeah, it's a long extended periods of like tons of boredom, and then super exciting, like punctuated by super exciting, sketchy takedowns. So yeah, I'd say the ratio is like 99-1 of like boredom to excitement. And then,
Yeah.
but training, you mentioned training. We do train, quite a bit. We train 3 days a month, SWAT training. And if we're not actively looking for someone, like if we don't have a target, then what we'll do is we'll go train. Usually, we'll either provide training for other units, other officers, or we'll train ourselves. So we do lots of like shooting drills and working out and room clearing tactics, vehicle takedowns, that kind of stuff.
And then just to kind of let viewers who may not be in law enforcement specifically when it comes to both patrol, but doing all this serving search warrants, taking these guys down. You see the pursuits, you see guns, drugs, everything. Like the bloodline of all police work that comes with it is paperwork. Everything is paperwork that comes with it. And that's just something I think I wanted to point out too, that maybe you can attest to. And I definitely know I can attest to. You see all the fun stuff usually on TV, you see all the cop shows, everything like that. But what they don't show is just hours and hours and hours and hours of paperwork that goes into every search warrant, every use of force, evidence bagging, all that.
Yeah. So if you get in a use of force incident, like as a patrol officer, say you end up getting some sort of little fight with somebody, and that might last 30 seconds, but the subsequent like documentation of that incident. So you get a 30-second use of force incident where you have to fight with somebody, take them down, or maybe you tase them or whatever you do to resolve that issue. And that's a little like 30 seconds of excitement. And then you're probably looking at like a solid 2 hours of time it's going to take you to like write the report, to explain everything, like
minimum.
Because you have to go to, rightfully so, you have to thoroughly document like everything leading up to that, your thought process and what you observed, what the suspect's behaviors were, the actions that you took. I mean, at least it's going to take you at least 2 hours to write that. And you're going to be double checking it with your body worn camera to make sure that you're remembering it correctly, and if there's other officers there, you're going to probably look at their body worn camera. And 2 hours is kind of on the low end of what it's going to take to cover that. So it's not like you're just, I always laugh at like cop movies, like Die Hard movies, where Bruce Willis is just running around, like he's just like one pursuit and he's like shooting these guys and he's over here doing this and it's just like boom, 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 like just going and going and going. Like every single scene in that is probably like a 6-month long investigation, right. And he's getting in like 20 of them and like, you know what I mean? Like, without even stopping, without even like slowing down.
Right. That's the funny part too, like being in law enforcement and watching cop movies, and then you almost can't help yourself sometimes. You're like, oh, shit, that would never happen. Or I would never do this. Just like, you watch, I've had, people ask me, I don't know if they ask you, like, they see movies like, or watch shows like The Rookie or like In the Watch or The Biz Cop, like how accurate is it? And I just usually tell them like, the show, or like, I don't know, have you seen End of Watch?
Yeah.
Okay. Like the first, few minutes of the movies, pursuit, they get in a big shootout, they dump 3 or 4 guys. Usually the movie would end right there because that's going to be about, several months investigation, admin work, and they're probably done after that. Yeah. It's, I think it's just. Exactly. But hey, it's Hollywood. Still a great movie.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good flick.
Yeah.
So no, there's a lot more that goes into the back end, the administrative portion than what people probably realize. That you spend a lot of time documenting the report writing, reviewing video to make sure everything's right, then booking evidence afterwards, and then testifying in court. Like you'll spend quite a bit of time, at least here in California. I don't know how it was for you guys at LAPD, but like me as a gang unit officer, I would be in court. I'd say I averaged like 3 days a week. 5-day work week, I was averaging like 3 days a week at court. And it's different experiences vary. We made lots of arrests, so we were having to go to court a lot. But then I also did a lot of gang expert testimony. We would file gang cases, and you have to come in and testify as an independent. It's not really independent, but outside of the case, like you're not involved as a gang expert in that particular case, and you're coming in, you're giving an opinion, and that then to do that is. Every time you do a gang expert, you're probably doing between 5 and 10 hours of prep work just to go in to testify. So you're reviewing reports, you're writing summaries, and preparing for the case to go in. And that's on the low end, on a low end case. If it's like a homicide trial or something real serious, you're probably spending 20, 30, 40 hours of time to just prepare to go in there to testify. And then when you testify on a big case, you could be up on the stand for like 2 to 3 days, just like nonstop.
Yeah.
So it's not all just, it's not all car chases and explosions,
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can attest to it just because obviously it's the long hours, especially working specialized units. There's no set hours. You're in court, you're up 2 or 3 in the morning, serving a search warrant. You're working in tandem with other specialized units or with, federal officers, marshals, task force, FBI, things like that. If you can, just learn like your own personal experience. Like how do you deal with it? Like when you're away from the job, like how do you cope with it? Because obviously that's That's a lot of time, it's a lot of stress, and you're a family man, you have a wife, you have kids. Like how do you find that balance?
That's a good question. So I remember as a gang unit officer, my daughter she was 9 when I started in the gang unit, and she started playing softball, like rec league softball, and then she got really competitive and started playing like travel competitive softball. She ended up going to college on a softball scholarship. But I was very involved in her life, and very involved in her development, and especially in the softball stuff. And so I ended up coaching for like 8 years. I coached her travel ball team. And the beginning of that time was when I was in the gang unit. And I would go where I would be at work and I would be doing all this like high speed cop stuff. And then I would have a day off, or like even sometimes like on work days, I would go and I would go to like softball practice, and I would be like, my life would switch from being around like just a bunch of hard charging cops and like dealing with, violent gang members, to like then I'm hanging out with a bunch of like 11-year-old girls like doing softball cheers. And so like the dichotomy between like the two different extremes of like the life that I was living, where it actually really helped to kind of keep me grounded, and it was nice to come back to, you're not just like stewing in like negativity and copland all the time. So I was fortunate for that, and I kind of mentioned that too earlier when we were talking about like having a purpose and having something meaningful to do. Like that was the thing for me. I was fortunate that I didn't get into like, you know, to drinking, like hitting the bottle to like cope with my time off, or like, doing drugs, or any sort of, unhealthy behaviors. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
gambling, pornography. There's just like a never ending like list of things that people can get into, unhealthy behaviors that they use to like distract themselves to cope with like the stress of their regular life. And again, like I said, fortunately for me, I'm not better than anyone else. I was just lucky that I ended up in this situation where like I had this purpose and I had this mission. So, yeah, very involved with like the kids and the wife. And I think that's the best way that I've found so far to go about managing, is to don't let the job define you as the person that you are. Like if you're a police officer and someone asks, you meet a stranger on the street or a party or something, and they ask you about yourself. If like all you can talk about is like your job, you know what I mean? Like, and the first thing and the only thing that comes to mind is to discuss things that you do as a cop and cop related stuff, like you probably have an unhealthy balance. If that job is defining who you are as a person, then you're probably at high risk of like burning out and stressing out. Whereas if you have some meaningful work or some meaningful purpose that's outside of this job, whatever that is, church, family, healthy hobbies, stuff like that you can use to disconnect from the work and to be focused on something else. Like you really have to have that.
Yeah, you make a really good point. It's finding that good work-life balance, which, as you've seen, a lot of numbers show, at least in this profession and just first responders in general, that there's a reason why like drug use, divorce rates, domestic violence, suicide rates. It's an unfortunate statistics that come with the job just because of the high stress and everything that just comes with it. And I think a lot of people on the job, regardless if it's law enforcement, if it's military, if it's EMT, firefighters, corrections, I think sometimes they're afraid to maybe come forward or maybe talk about what's going on. Like what do you think stops cops or just first responders from getting help? Is it that identity? Is it pride? Is it a culture thing?
Probably all of that. Yeah. The fear of being looked at as someone who can't handle it, I think, is what holds people back. And when I think about that, I've kind of, the role that I'm in now, I've been there 18 years. I'm a sergeant. Like the role that I have now is a leadership role. And one of the things I really think about is making it okay for people to not like be okay all the time, right? Because like
Mm,
sometimes you're not okay, and it's easy to get sucked into that. If the culture, whatever industry you work at, is that you have to be locked in, and if you show any kind of weakness or you show any kind of like sign that you're like starting to kind of crack or not able to handle it, that you're not going to be accepted by the group. If that's the culture, then like you're going to breed a whole lot more of that and a whole lot more of those negative behaviors that I talked about. And the way I look at it now from a leadership position is like I try to just be open about it. If you're acting like this doesn't affect you, like you're lying either to me or you're lying to yourself, right? And I've been in those situations where I've, you know, lied about it to myself and others. They're like, "Oh, this doesn't bother me, whatever." And as I've gotten older, I've realized like that's all bullshit. And I think it's important for me from a leadership position to like just be open about my own experiences and my own like things that upset me and bother me, and so that the younger officers can use that as an example. Like if you're a 2, 3 year officer and you see a guy who's been around a long time who's like, it kind of bothers me sometimes, then you can not have to feel the pressure of like having to be just completely like unbothered, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it really is an amalgamation of like what you said. It's the cultures, the stigma, it's the pressure, it's identity, it's, are they going to see my badge and gun? Am I going to be seen as crazy? I can't hack it. Am I a fucking pussy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
It's
even before you get to that point, though, I mean, like, because like you said, it's an amalgamation, and like when you came on our podcast and kind of talked about it with yourself, it's like I don't think you didn't just suddenly all of a sudden one day get to the point where like this is too much to handle.
right.
It's a process,
Right.
and I feel like things could have been different for you, and it could do for thousands of others. Where if like we kind of caught on to it early and like made it okay to like, hey, maybe we can decompress and talk about this and sort this these early stage things that are happening early on in your career and sort them out early on instead of like suppressing them and letting them build and over time until all of a sudden now you're breaking. It's like it doesn't just happen all of a sudden. I think maybe it does sometimes, but like you've said before, it's an amalgamation, and I think if the departments and the cultures make it okay to or have better resources or have better systems in place to mitigate that early on, that you will have less less stress retirements, less of that those negative off-duty behaviors. And yeah, I don't really know what the answer is other than to like to try to make it okay to not be okay, and to try to like get people help early on, like from the beginning, instead of bottling it up and until it's finally too much for them to handle.
Um, I usually try to ask a couple of my guests when they come on if, like, say you were chief of police, chief
Mhm.
of BPD.
Yeah.
Is there a change that you would like to implement or something you think would better help in regards to mental health of law enforcement officers?
Yeah, I think that you could. I don't know exactly how this would look like, but like we have some mental health services and some nonprofits that help with people that ask for it, right? But the problem is that like the person has to ask for it, and uh, and that's a big step, for admitting like, okay, I'm not okay, I need help, I need to go now, take whatever step that is, talk to a supervisor or reach out to whoever it is to get that help. And if you're at that point, I don't want to say that you're too far gone, but a lot of time, like the problem has festered to a point to where you're kind of too far gone at that point when you finally get to the point where you're going to come out and like seek the help. I think that a way that you could mitigate that or catch that early on is just make it part of, like we have mandatory trainings that we send people to. Like you have to attend advanced officer school, once every 2 years or whatever it is, and you have all these like regular ongoing trainings for all sorts of other things that you could mandate, like some kind of therapy session, some kind of therapy like one-on-one with the therapist, and that way like they you could put people in and say maybe some people don't need it, maybe even most people don't need it. But I don't think there's a negative effect if you're a person who isn't dealing with anything, you don't have any stress, you don't have any anxiety, you don't have anything that you need therapy for, and you go to therapy, there's not going to be like a negative consequence. You're going to come out of the other end of that like worse off than you were before, right? But if you are, but you're not afraid, if you're afraid to admit it, or you're starting to kind of have some of these issues and you don't know what to do about it, but you don't recognize it, like that could be beneficial to kind of nipping it in the bud and saving you early on. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think I don't I'm not a big fan of mandating people to do things, right? But we mandate
right.
people to go to training all the time, and I think that you could very easily be like, "Hey, once every 6 months, you're gonna go one-on-one. The department has no idea what you're talking about in your session, obviously, 'cause there's a, like, client privilege. You go to your session, it's mandated, and if nothing comes of it and you just sit there and chit chat for an hour, then whatever, like no harm, no foul. But if the therapist identifies some issues, or you start to work on identify some issues. Well, then here is the information pamphlet that they'll be able to provide for you that you can now go and you can and seek additional help on your own. That's completely separate from the department knowing who you are or what you are.
Right.
So yeah, I really think that we could benefit from having something like that in place, where it's like maybe every 6 months or so you get a mandated hour where you got to go in, and we don't know anything about what you say in there. And then if you want to go additional, seek further, or if you just want to be one and done, it's up to you.
Yeah. Um, you brought up a really, really good point because I think sometimes it feels like it's more reactionary than pro.
It's not
You know,
proactive; it's reactive.
exactly. And the misconception is like, oh, I have to wait for until things really go to shit before therapy will be some sort of benefit. Whereas, when things haven't gone to shit and you're in a calm and steady and things are going good, it does more benefit. It's a much better benefit for you to maybe talk to someone. So that way, if and when things do or something happens where it may warrant, like a traumatic incident or something like that, you already having the necessary steps or maybe tools that you had before it happened may mitigate some of that stress or some of that trauma that may have occurred. And it's not to say it's going to completely, totally get rid of it, but rather than it being completely up here, maybe it's, decreased to a certain amount. But, and again,
What do you think?
everyone's different.
I'm curious what you think about that. So, like in your situation, you told me that you were like 3.5 years where you started to really get this like, debilitating like anxiety attacks, and you started really like going through it. Do you think that in your situation, hindsight being 2020, if you could turn back the clock, if the department would have mandated you to go to like therapy once every 6 months, and you do like an hour session at your 6 month mark, and then at your 1 year mark, and then at year and a half mark, that sitting down with a therapist, talking about some of the things that have happened and your experiences, do you think that that would have helped to kind of mitigate it or nip it in the bud, or prevent the like you said that you call it the amalgamation of things that ended up all coming together?
Yeah, I think it would have. In my own personal experience, yeah, I think it totally would have. Because again, before, I don't know what your experience was like in the academy. They're like, this job's tough. You might see a lot of shit, do a lot of things. Here's, they write it on the bulletin board. Here's number to a psych, the shrink department, and then that's about it. Maybe it's different now. Who knows? But usually that's about it. And I've never had therapy, never been to a psychologist, never. And they never really tell you about that. They never really, until it's like, oh, you have officer involved shooting or something traumatic. And then it's like, again, it's the reactionary, like, oh, I'm really struggling with this. And then it's like, and that's part of it too. It's like, I have no idea how to navigate this. Who do I talk to? Where do I go? But yeah, I think having even just like a mandated once every 6 months, like you said, if it's for an hour and, the department isn't aware of what you say or what's going on, you have that client therapist privilege to just kind of unload what's going on. Even if nothing's going on and everything it's fine. It's good. It's like car maintenance, right? It's good to go in and just be able to, make sure everything's on the up and up and everything's good. And if you do find that you're struggling with some things, well then, you're already there. You have the resources and then you can, take the steps to, if need be, find more help. But yeah, I really do think that would be a big help. And again, it's not asking for, you're going to be in therapy once a week and it's mandated, all that, just once every 6 months. I don't think that's asking a lot for an hour, 45 minutes, 30 minutes.
Yep.
So
And I think I think it's also a good financial decision, because I mean, think how many officers that departments lose all the time that have to go out on stress retirements. Like, because one of the arguments against it would be like, well, what is it going to cost to send every officer in this department or that department twice a year to some therapy sessions? It's probably a pretty big price tag, but I would argue that the price tag is bigger that we're paying when we're having people stressing out and going out, and the cost savings would be pretty significant.
yeah, no, but you're right. I think that would be a great change. Maybe it'll happen. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's department too.
yeah, yeah, that is very, very true. Yeah, but Sergeant Harless, I wanted to just thank you real quick for coming on and
Of
spending some
course.
time with me. And but I
Yeah,
wanted
man. Thanks
to
for having me.
yeah, thank you. And I wanted to just talk real quick. Just talk about your own podcast that you run, Badge
Yeah,
Bullets and
sure.
Blunders. I wanted to plug you and just tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, so I've got a podcast called Badges, Bullets, and Blunders. Me and one of my friends from the department put on this little podcast. It's mainly it started off as us telling funny cop stories. Um, we would sit down with the guests, mostly police officers, and we would talk about like just funny things, mostly self-deprecating humor, mostly like dumb things that have happened to us. And as time has gone on, we've kind of evolved and branched out into other topics. We usually keep it mostly light. We don't get super dark, but sometimes we do, and we tell stories about funny things that happen on the job. But we have recently been branching out and doing more long form. We had you on talking about your experiences and talk about your work now, and we've had other guests that are not in law enforcement come on, and it's focused on law enforcement issues and law enforcement adjacent issues. We do some incident debriefs, just all kinds of stuff. But it's called Badges, Bullets, and Blunders. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then we also have Instagram, TikTok, and that's at Badges, Bullets, Blunders.
Awesome. All right. Well, Travis, again, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you being here.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You take care.
You too.